Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Really Truly Ruthie. Chapter 3, East of the Sun and West of the Moon. As they began to trudge up the hill, Charlie asked, Are you sure we were right to believe that old man on the train? Well, of course, said Ruthie. She acted more confident than she felt, though I do wish we didn't have to walk all the way. Just then, Ruthie and Charlie heard a jingling sound behind them. Hey there, said friendly voices. Ruthie's heart lifted to see the teenage girls from the train. They were riding in a rickety old horse-drawn wagon, driven by a man who looked as if he must be their father. Hop in, said one of the girls. Pa says we can give you a lift as far as Ferndale. The road splits there, and you can head off to Mountain Hollow. Thanks, said Ruthie and Charlie with grateful grins. There's far too much rattle and bang in the wagon for conversation, but the two girls and their father started to sing at the top of their voices, so Ruthie and Charlie joined in. Every morning, every evening, ain't we got fun? Not much money, oh but honey, ain't we got fun? There's nothing sure, the richer get richer and the poor get poorer. In the meantime, between time, ain't we got fun? They were bounced and jostled so much in the wagon that Ruthie felt as if her bones were being shaken apart. And the old horse plodded along more slowly than she and Charlie had stumbled along on foot. The singing was cheering, and riding was better than walking, which Ruthie and Charlie quickly appreciated as they were dropped off at Ferndale. They set forth huffing and puffing up the branch the roads had led to Mountain Hollow. The logging road was so slick and muddy that Ruthie slid back between two steps for every step forward she took. The sky was a sullen gray and overhead, and soon the singing sleet began to fall. Ruthie knew if she wasn't so hot and sweaty from walking, she'd be freezing. You know, said Charlie, there wasn't any actual sign saying that this road leads to Mountain Hollow. We're just blinding, trusting strangers again. He was quiet for a moment and then went on. I suppose you're thinking that this sort of thing happens all the time in fairy tales. They're kind to strangers, sharing food and things, and then it turns out that they help you where you need to go. Even, he said with a smile, if it's east of the sun and west of the moon, that doesn't really work in real life, Ruthie. Ruthie sighed. I know you think I'm silly, Charlie, she said. Not so much silly as mistaken, said Charlie. You think everyone is like you, nice and honest and waiting to help. But the world's not like that. People are going to take advantage of you. They're going to let you down. If you're foolishly optimistic, you're going to be disappointed. Ruthie slogged a long icy slush cake on her shoes, and icy sleet trickled down her back. She knew that Charlie had a terrible disappointment in his life. He had been supposed to go to college, but when the Great Depression came, Mr. Kidder had lost his job. There was no money to send him. So instead, Charlie was working, loading newspapers onto trucks before dawn every day. Ruthie understood that the world had let Charlie down. Ruthie struggled to say what she had in her head. I don't really believe that life always works out happily like fairy tales do, she said slowly. And the wishes come true and the happy endings aren't the only reasons I like fairy tales. I like them because they show no matter what happens to us, it's how we act along the way that matters. We still get to choose what kind of people we want to be. And while I guess I'd rather be foolish but hopeful about people than smart but stingy and distrustful. Charlie looked at Ruthie out of the corner of her eye, as if he considered what she said. Then, suddenly his face lit up. Hey, he said, I know where we are. He pointed to a narrow path and went off left. Aunt Millie's cabin is just up this path a ways, he said, and Mountain Hollow is a mile or so past that. He grinned at Ruthie and gave her a congratulatory wallop on the back, saying, I guess we've found east of the sun and west of the moon after all. The path to Aunt Millie's was crisscrossed by little streams and pocked with puddles hidden under soggy leaves. Ruthie's shoes were soaked. She didn't see how they could be any wetter. They squished with each step and water oozed out of them. But now that Ruthie and Charlie knew they were almost there, they both felt so cheered up that they sped up and forgot all about being wet and cold. They walked even faster when, through the leafless trees, they saw the welcome sight of Aunt Millie's cabin ahead. Kit had told Ruthie that Aunt Millie's cabin was next to the school where she taught. Ruthie was not surprised to see that the school was shut up, dark and empty. It was Christmas vacation after all. But she was surprised, heart-sinkingly so, to see that Aunt Millie's cabin also looked deserted. The door was shut tight, and there was no movement from the inside, and no sound except the dreary plink, plink, plink of falling asleep. Charlie knocked and called out, "Aunt Millie?" But no one answered. It was plain to see that Aunt Millie was not at home. "Oh no," moaned Ruthie silently. She thought that getting to Aunt Millie's cabin would be the hard part of the trip. It had never occurred to her that Aunt Millie would not be home. Worries wormed their way into Ruthie's thought. What if we can't find Aunt Millie, she wondered. Our whole trip will be wasted. The kidder just won't get the money they need. I'll confirm everyone's opinion that I'm useless, and everything will be lost. Ruthie shivered as much as dread from the cold. Charlie was too polite to say, "Now what?" But Ruthie could tell by the discouraged slump of his shoulders that that's what he was thinking. And she did not blame him. "Well," she said. She put her shoulders back, remembering her resolution to prove her worth, and made her voice sound brisk and sure. "Aunt Millie's probably visiting friends in town. We better go see." Without a word, Charlie followed Ruthie down the mountain toward the little town that was Mountain Hollow. With every step, Ruthie fought to keep her hopes up. She wished with all her might. Please, please let Aunt Millie be here. Please let us find her. We've got to." The sky over the mountains had lost all color, and the soft whispering snow had begun to fall when Ruthie and Charlie walked down the main street of Mountain Hollow. It was a tiny town. Ruthie saw that there was only one bank, one post office, one store, and a few little houses. The snow muffled the sound of Charlie and Ruthie's footsteps, and it seemed, in fact, to have silenced the whole town. It was as if the snow were some sort of magic sleeping dust that put everyone to sleep. Every building looked as empty and deserted as Millie's cabin had. "The place is a ghost town," whispered Charlie. "Where is everybody?" "I wish I knew," said Ruthie. "It's like an enchanted village out of one of your fairy stories," said Charlie. "Everyone vanished between Christmas and New Year's Day." Something stirred in Ruthie's brain. She remembered seeing the young mother on a train had said to her about the big party her hometown always had between Christmas and New Year's Day. Could it be that Mountain Hollow had a party too? Just then, the answer flowed towards Ruthie. As soft and light as the snow in the air came the faint sound of music. "Charlie," asked Ruthie, "where's the church?" Charlie tilted his head to show the way. "It's just ahead on Front Street," he said. "Come on," said Ruthie joyfully. She ran, bent forward in the snow. The closer she got to the church, the louder the music sounded, dancing out of the air to beckon her. Even more welcome was the heavenly aroma of wood smoke and food. When Charlie heard the music and smelled the food, he caught up and grabbed her hand and pulled her along so fast she didn't seem to touch the ground. Charlie opened the door of the church and led Ruthie down the stairs to the church hall. As they entered the hall, Ruthie thought that no glittering ballroom in any fairy tale castle could have ever looked as beautiful as the room in front of her. Not that the room was fancy, not at all. It was plain as a barn, with only a few pine boughs tucked behind the wall for decoration, but it was so full of light and noise and people. Young, old, medium, and even babies have a rollicking good time. Long tables were laden with food. They were golden brown turkeys, buttery biscuits, pink hams, orange mashed yams, pies that looked miles wide, and cakes many layers tall. The floor shook underfoot because of the dancers' feet and everyone stomping along to music. And best of all, the room was positively hot, which made it feel like paradise to Ruthie. Suddenly the room was quiet. Every face turned toward Ruthie and Charlie, who stood, beaming and dripping like snowflakes, at the door. "Hi, folks," said Charlie. "Heavenly day," said a bustling woman Ruthie knew at once to be Aunt Millie. Charles Jackson Kitteridge, is that you? Yes, ma'am, Aunt Millie, it is, said Charlie. He put his arm around Ruthie's shoulder. And this is Kit's friend Ruthie. You're as welcome as sunshine. Of course, said Aunt Millie as she hugged Charlie first and then Ruthie. No one's sick or hurt at home. Are they? No, said Charlie. Well then, said Aunt Millie in her peppery tone, I've got to ask, what in tarnation are you two doing here? Hey, fun fact, what in tarnation comes from what in eternal damnation? That, said Charlie with a sideways smile at Ruthie, is a long story. Aunt Millie propelled them toward a table. In that case, sit down and have something to eat and drink, she said. Your story will keep, but I've never seen two sorrier-looking creatures than the pair of you. You're like to fade if you don't get some food inside the crick. In the next few minutes, Ruthie felt like Beauty in Beauty and the Beast, because it seemed as if invisible hands whisked away her sodden coat, hat, shoes, and socks to dry by the heat and gave her thick red socks and a toasty warm blanket to wrap up while she waited. A steaming plate of the best tasting food she had ever eaten in her life appeared in front of her head. As if by magic, refilled itself. No matter how she ate, a bunch of friendly girls at her age just sat around Ruthie, chatting easily with her and making her feel comfortable and immediately at home. Ruthie had never met Aunt Millie, who's too busy being a teacher to come to Cincinnati, but it was also impossible to feel shy around her, especially after Aunt Millie spotted Ruthie's book in her lunch basket. Are you reading East of the Sun and West of the Moon? Aunt Millie asked her. Yes, Ruthie admitted. One of my favorites, stated Aunt Millie. Really? Asked Ruthie, surprised. She blurted out, I've never met a grown-up who reads fairy tales before. They have the wisdom of the ages in them, said Aunt Millie in her teacherly manner. Folk tales, fairy tales, tall tales, myths, and legends have inspired some of the greatest literature ever written. Even my own favorite author, William Shakespeare, based some of his finest works on legends. And he put fairies and magic and princesses in lots of his plays. Why, it would be a waste and a shame not to know the old stories. And, laughed Charlie, there's nothing Aunt Millie dislikes more than waste. Too true, said Aunt Millie, and I'm afraid time's a-wasted now. She drew Ruthie and Charlie sat in a corner where they could talk privately and said, So, as Shakespeare would say, tell me in one word, what do you need? Help, said Charlie. He explained to Aunt Millie about the money the family owed to the bank, and Ruthie explained how she discovered that Kitteridges were going to be evicted December 28th if they could not come up with the money. Dad will be back from Florida with some money by January 2nd, Charlie said. But that will be too little too late, so we're here to ask you for an emergency loan. The money's yours and welcome, said Aunt Millie. Charlie hugged Aunt Millie, and he said, I promise we'll pay you back as soon as we can. Oh, I know you will, said Aunt Millie, but don't let your dad fret about it. There's not much use for money in these parts anyway. We grow up what we eat, and there's nothing much to buy. Besides, I've never noticed that money made a day much longer or me much smarter, so what's the use of it? She stood up and gestured a meek-looking man. Thurgood, she said, let's go. I need to get money out of the bank. The meek man bleated. But Miss Millie, he said, it's after 3 o'clock. The bank is closed. Great day in the morning, exclaimed Aunt Missy. She fixed the bank with a flinty glare. Thurgood, you whippersnapper, she ordered. Open up a bank for me or I'll tell everyone how long it took you to learn your fractions when you were my student 30 years ago. Everyone laughed, even Thurgood. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. See